People like you have no place here. Component placement. The auctioneer sneered, snatching the registration form from the old man's hands. Laughter erupted as the elderly farmer was escorted outside, still clutching his envelope of cash. But the security camera at the exit had captured the entire scene, and just 5 minutes later, nobody was laughing anymore. When the governor's SUV convoy screeched to a halt right in front of the auction hall, "Welcome to QH. Let's uncover what really happened." Walter Granger was 73 years old. Quiet farmer who had spent his entire life in Lacey County. His weathered hands bore the calluses of decades working the same land his family had owned since 1927. The property wasn't just real estate to Walter, it was his heritage, his identity, and the only home he had ever known. For nearly a century, the Granger Farm had stood as a humble monument to family perseverance. Walter's grandfather had survived the Dust Bowl without selling a single acre. His father had modernized just enough to stay viable through the agricultural revolutions of the mid-century, and Walter himself had maintained the traditions while adapting to changing times, though never with substantial profit. Recent months had brought unexpected challenges due to a combination of back taxes he hadn't realized were unpaid and documentation errors following his wife's passing. Walter's beloved property had been placed on the county's public auction list. The notification had arrived unexpectedly, leaving him with just 45 days to somehow save generations of family history. There must be some mistake, he had told the county clerk. A young woman who looked at him with genuine sympathy but shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Granger. The paperwork is finalized. The only way to stop the auction now would be to pay the outstanding amount in full." Walter had nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion as he asked, "And how much would that be?" The sum, 14,318, represented almost everything Walter had managed to save throughout his life of hard work and frugality. But he didn't hesitate. If this was what it took to keep his family's legacy intact, he would pay it. On the morning of the auction, Walter rose before dawn, as he had every day for over 60 years. He showered meticulously, shaved with extra care, and put on his best shirt, a blue button-down he usually reserved for church Sundays. In front of the mirror, he carefully combed his thinning white hair and straightened his posture. Appearances mattered today. From beneath his mattress, Walter retrieved an old postal envelope containing neatly stacked bills, his life savings withdrawn from the bank the previous day. He counted it twice, then tucked it securely in his inside jacket pocket, patting it gently for reassurance. The drive to the county seat took 40 minutes in his 1992 Ford pickup. Its once blue paint now faded to a pale sky color. Walter parked in the public lot behind the government building where the auction was to be held. He arrived early, watching silently as luxury cars and shiny SUVs filled the spaces around him. Men and women in expensive suits walked briskly past his truck, some casting curious glances at the old vehicle and its elderly driver. Inside the building's grand meeting hall, Walter took a seat in the back row. The room buzzed with conversation as real estate investors, developers, and land speculators discussed potential acquisitions. Walter sat alone, his hands carefully filling out the required participation form with painstaking precision. When he approached the registration desk, the young clerk glanced at his paperwork, then at Walter's worn jeans and work boots. Something in her expression shifted as she examined his registration. She whispered something to a colleague who motioned to the head auctioneer. The man, expensively dressed with a gold watch that caught the light, scanned Walter's form and frowned. "Mr. Granger, is it? I see you've indicated cash payment. I'm afraid that's not acceptable for transactions of this nature." Walter reached inside his jacket. "I've brought the full amount, 14,300 envelopes. We require a bank guarantee or certified check," the auctioneer interrupted, making no effort to hide his condescension. "Not cash in an envelope. This isn't a farmer's market." Someone nearby chuckled, and the sound rippled through the gathering crowd. "There was nothing in the notice about," Walter began. "It's standard procedure," the auctioneer cut him off again. "Security will show you out. Perhaps you can speak with the county office about proper procedures for next time." Two security guards appeared at Walter's elbows, gently but firmly guiding him toward the exit. As they walked, Walter heard whispers and muffled laughter. One clear voice remarked, "Did he really think he could buy back his farm with cash from under his mattress?" Walter didn't resist. He didn't argue. With dignity and tact, he pulled his cap lower over his eyes and walked out, still clutching his envelope of life savings. What no one realized was that a local reporter, assigned to cover the auction for the county newspaper, had captured the entire interaction on video. "If you believe someone trying deserves to be heard, please stay with us." In the parking lot, Walter sat on the tailgate of his pickup truck, gazing at the government building. The morning sun beat down on his shoulders, but he barely noticed the heat. From his back pocket, he withdrew a folded paper, a copy of the letter he had sent to the governor's office 2 weeks earlier. He smoothed the creases and read his own words again. I'm not asking for money or special treatment. I'm only asking for a fair chance to keep what my father left me, land that has fed this county for nearly a century. He hadn't expected a response, and none had come. Government officials had more important concerns than an old farmer's property dispute. Walter understood this. He'd lived long enough to know his place in the world's hierarchy. Inside the building, the auction had begun. Through the open windows, Walter could hear the auctioneer's practice cadence as parcels of land were sold to the highest bidders. He checked his watch. The Granger Farm was third on the list. Within minutes, his family's legacy would belong to strangers who saw it only as an investment opportunity or development potential. A local resident exited the building, shaking his head when he spotted Walter. They just sold your place, the man said, genuine regret in his voice. Some investment group from Dallas. They didn't even ask questions about the property condition. Walter nodded, folding his letter and returning it to his pocket. Thank you for telling me. It's not right, the man added, but then fell silent, both of them knowing that right rarely factored into business transactions. Walter climbed into his truck and inserted the key into the ignition. But before he could turn it, the distant sound of sirens caught his attention. He looked up to see a commotion at the entrance to the government complex. 5 black SUVs, with tinted windows, turned sharply into the driveway, followed by 2 police motorcycles. The lead vehicle bore the state flag on its hood, the mark of the governor's official transportation. Doors opened simultaneously on the first 3 vehicles. Suited men and women, clearly security personnel and aides, emerged and quickly surveyed the area. Then from the middle SUV stepped a woman whose face was familiar to everyone in the state, Governor Elise Thornton. At 58, Governor Thornton had a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency and occasional strategic acts of political theater. She moved with purposeful strides toward the building entrance, ignoring the reporters who had materialized seemingly from nowhere, their questions falling unanswered in her wake. Walter watched in bewilderment as the governor and her entourage disappeared into the building. He remained frozen, keys still in the ignition, trying to make sense of the coincidence. The governor's appearance at a routine county property auction was highly unusual, to say the least. Inside, the auction continued. The investment group representatives were already discussing their plans for the Granger Farm with neighboring bidders, speaking of potential housing developments and commercial possibilities. The large double doors at the back of the hall swung open dramatically. Conversations died mid-sentence as Governor Thornton entered, flanked by her chief of staff and security detail. She walked directly to the front of the room, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found the auctioneer. This proceeding is temporarily suspended, she announced, her voice carrying authority that needed no microphone. Where is Walter Granger? The auctioneer, suddenly flustered, gestured vaguely toward the exit. He was asked to leave. Find him, the governor instructed one of her aides. Immediately, within minutes, Walter found himself face to face with the governor of his state. He removed his cap awkwardly as she approached his truck. Mr. Granger, she said, extending her hand, I received your letter last night. Walter shook her hand, his confusion evident. I never expected you to read it, ma'am. I read every letter that crosses my desk, she replied, though both knew this was likely an exaggeration. Sometimes they arrive at exactly the right moment. She turned to her chief of staff. Issue an administrative hold on the Granger property transaction. Cite Regulation 42B for improper notification of sale terms. The aide nodded, already typing on a tablet. I don't understand, Walter said, looking between the governor and her staff. Governor Thornton's expression softened slightly. Mr. Granger, your letter arrived just as my office was finalizing an investigation into certain land acquisition practices across the state. There have been irregularities in how some properties, particularly long-standing family farms, have been brought to auction. Walter's weathered face revealed nothing of his inner thoughts. A lifetime of stoic endurance had taught him to mask both hope and despair. The requirement for bank guarantees rather than cash wasn't listed in your auction notice. The governor continued. That's a violation of state transparency laws. Furthermore, the original tax assessment that led to this situation contains several procedural errors that my office has identified. Inside the auction hall, word had spread that something unprecedented was happening. Bidders and spectators moved to the windows, watching the governor speaking with the elderly farmer they had so recently dismissed. I'm just a farmer, ma'am, Walter said finally. I don't know about regulations or procedures. I only know that land has been in my family since 1927, she finished for him. Yes, your letter made that quite clear, and it's precisely family farms like yours that built this state and continue to form its backbone. For the first time in many years, Walter Granger found himself speechless. He had come prepared to lose everything today. He had steeled himself against humiliation and defeat. He had not prepared for the possibility of hope. In the distance, the reporter who had filmed Walter's ejection from the auction was capturing this new development. Her camera focused on the unlikely scene of the state's highest official standing in a county parking lot, speaking earnestly with an elderly farmer beside his aging pickup truck. Type fairness if you believe patience and dignity deserve to be heard. By nightfall, the video had gone viral, the original clip of Walter being escorted from the auction, followed by footage of the governor's intervention, had been viewed over 100,000 times in just hours. By morning, that number exceeded 1 million. News outlets across the state ran headlines like "Farmer Humiliated," "Governor Intervenes," "Ancestral Land Saved," "Justice for Elderly Farmer," "David vs. Goliath," "73-year-old stands up to system and wins." The auction company issued a carefully worded apology, citing miscommunication about acceptable payment methods and promising to review internal procedure. The investment firm that had attempted to purchase the Granger Farm withdrew quietly, particularly after state regulators announced a comprehensive review of their recent land acquisitions. 3 days after the auction, Walter received a call from the governor's office. He was requested to attend a meeting at the county administration building, the same place where he had faced humiliation just days before. This time, when he entered, personnel greeted him by name, offering him coffee and directing him to a conference room where several officials waited. Granger, the county administrator, began. "We want to personally apologize for the treatment you received during the auction. It was inappropriate and did not reflect the values of this county." Walter nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, but appreciative of the acknowledgement. Furthermore, the administrator continued, "Governor Thornton has directed a full review of your property's tax status. Our assessment has revealed several errors in how your late wife's estate was processed, which incorrectly triggered the tax delinquency notice." A folder was placed before Walter containing legal documents with official seals. The administrator explained in simplified terms, the tax issue had been resolved, the auction sale invalidated, and the property returned to Walter's full ownership. "There's something else," the woman from the governor's office added, sliding another document across the table. "Someone has come forward wishing to assist with any remaining financial obligations associated with your property." Walter frowned. "I don't accept charity." "It's not charity, Mr. Granger." The individual was quite specific about that. The document revealed that an anonymous donor had established a trust to cover any outstanding tax obligations for the Granger Farm, with additional funds for necessary repairs to bring the property up to current agricultural standards. Walter stared at the paper, his weathered hands trembling slightly. "Who would do this?" The woman smiled. "They requested anonymity, but did leave this for you." She handed him a sealed envelope. Inside was a simple note written in neat handwriting. "Miss Granger, when I was 10 years old, my family lost everything in the drought of '94. My father couldn't find work, and we couldn't afford food. You gave us vegetable seeds, and taught my father how to grow them, even though you were struggling yourself. You probably don't remember. It was just one of countless kindnesses in your life. But that garden fed our family until my father found work again. I'm now the CEO of a technology company. What you gave us wasn't just food, it was dignity and hope. Consider this a repayment of a debt long overdue." "A child who once ran through your fields." Walter remembered the family vaguely, one of many who had fallen on hard times during that difficult period. He thought nothing of sharing seeds and knowledge. It had seemed the natural thing to do. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Very real," the governor's representative confirmed. "Your anonymous benefactor was quite determined once they learned of your situation. They reached out to our office, almost simultaneously, with your letter." Word of Walter's story continued to spread. The viral video had resonated with people across the political spectrum. Conservatives appreciated his self-reliance and connection to traditional values. Progressives saw him as a victim of corporate interests and systemic inequity. For once, Americans of different viewpoints found common ground in supporting an elderly farmer's simple desire to keep his family land. 2 weeks after the auction incident, Walter received another call from the governor's office. This time, he was invited to speak at the state agricultural fair, an annual event that typically featured politicians and agricultural industry representatives, not individual farmers. On the morning of the fair, Walter once again put on his Sunday shirt and carefully combed his hair. This time, he drove to the state fairgrounds, where thousands had gathered for the event. He was escorted to a waiting area behind the main stage, where Governor Thornton greeted him. "Nervous?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Walter admitted, not used to speaking to crowds. "Just speak from the heart, Mr. Granger. That's what got my attention in the first place." When Walter was introduced, the crowd applauded politely, many not fully aware of his story. But as he stepped to the microphone, the large screens around the fairgrounds displayed the now famous video footage. Walter being escorted from the auction hall, followed by the governor's intervention. The applause grew louder, more genuine. Walter pulled the old envelope from his pocket, the same one that had contained his life savings, now empty but symbolically powerful. "I came to that auction to save my family's legacy," he began, his voice surprisingly steady. "I didn't come asking for handouts. I came with every dollar I'd saved, asking only for fairness." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. "What I received was more than fair. I received recognition that some things can't be measured in dollars, not family history, not the land that supported generations, not the dignity of honest work." By the time Walter finished his brief, unpolished speech, many in the audience were visibly. The governor joined him on stage, announcing a new family farm preservation initiative designed to protect long-standing agricultural properties from predatory acquisition and development. What the audience didn't know, what even Walter didn't fully realize, was that his viral moment had transformed into something larger than himself. He had become a symbol of resistance against the faceless machinery of modern commerce, a reminder that behind every property transaction, every tax notice, every auction listing, there were human stories with real consequences. As Walter left the stage to thunderous applause, a reporter asked him how it felt to have influenced state policy. "I'm just a farmer," he replied with characteristic humility. "Always have been, always will be. If my story helps someone else keep their land, then something good came from all." But Walter Granger was no longer just a farmer. He had become something more powerful, a reminder of values that transcended politics. A symbol of dignity in the face of dismissal, and living proof that sometimes justice could still prevail in unexpected ways. Type justice if you believe kindness is never wasted. 1 month after his unexpected moment in the spotlight, Walter returned to the quiet routines of his farm. The media attention had gradually faded, as it inevitably does, but its effects remained tangible in both large and small ways. The most immediate change was physical. The anonymous donor's generosity had allowed for critical repairs to the property's infrastructure. The leaking roof on the old barn had been replaced. The irrigation system, which had been patchworked together for decades, now functioned efficiently. The farmhouse itself had received necessary updates to its electrical system, making it safer without compromising its century-old character. But the most meaningful transformation hung on the weathered wooden gate at the entrance to the property. A new hand-carved sign read simply "Granger Farm, established 1927, restored 2023. Walter ran his fingers over the freshly painted letters, feeling a connection to both past and future that he had nearly lost. The farm itself had become something of a local landmark. School groups occasionally visited to learn about traditional farming methods. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance now stopped by with offerings of food or help. Even the county officials who had once processed his tax delinquency paperwork without a second thought now greeted him by name when he visited town. On a warm Saturday morning, Walter was repairing a section of fence when a minivan pulled into his drive. A family emerged, parents and 2 children, the younger one clutching a school notebook. "Mr. Granger," the father called. "Sorry to interrupt. My son's doing a school project on local history. Would you mind if he asked you some questions about your farm?" Walter set down his tools and wiped his hands on a rag. "Happy to help." The young boy approached cautiously. "Is it true the governor came here because of you?" Walter smiled. "Not because of me, because of what I represent." "What's that?" the boy asked. Walter considered his answer carefully. "The idea that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds seem against you, that standing up for your beliefs matters, even if you think nobody's listening." As the boy scribbled in his notebook, Walter invited the family to walk the property with him. He showed them the old oak tree his grandfather had planted, the field where his father had experimented with drought-resistant crops during the Dust Bowl, the small stream where he himself had played as a child. History isn't just in books, he explained. It's in the land beneath your feet. Later that afternoon, after the family had left, Walter sat on his porch, watching the sunset cast long shadows across fields that had nearly slipped from his grasp. A small package had arrived that morning from the state capitol, a framed copy of the Family Farm Preservation Initiative, signed by the governor, with a handwritten note. Mr. Granger, your courage reminded us all that government should serve people, not processes. Thank you for your letter. Inside his modest farmhouse on the central wooden post that had supported the structure for nearly a century, Walter mounted a small handmade plaque. This isn't just land, it's memory. When a national news program finally convinced him to give an interview, Walter's response to their questions about his newfound influence was characteristically humble. I didn't change the world, he said, looking out across the fields his family had tended for generations. I just reminded people that folks like me, who work the land, who keep their word, value history, still matter in this modern world. That night, as Walter watched the sky deepen over his fields, he realized it wasn't the headlines or speeches that mattered most. It was the way neighbors now waved, the letters arriving in his mailbox from strangers, the school kids walking his land to learn its stories. He hadn't just saved a farm, he'd rekindled something long missing, the belief that one voice, steady and patient, could still echo loud enough to be heard. As the sun set on Granger Farm, casting long shadows across fields that would remain in the family for at least another generation, Walter Granger understood something profound. His victory wasn't just personal, it was a small rebalancing of scales that too often tipped toward money and influence, rather than dignity and perseverance. His land had been saved, but something larger had been preserved as well. The idea that occasionally the system could still work as intended, recognizing the value of things that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Have you ever witnessed someone being misjudged, then making the whole world reconsider? Share a moment when you saw dignity speak louder than everything else. Subscribe to QH Incredible Stories, where the quietest people deliver the most powerful lessons.